back in the 80s when we would record music, go into studios and record music, they always had the speakers they used in the studios were NS10s. You had to have NS10s. That was the big thing. Every studio you went in, oh, they've got NS10s, they've got NS10s. And of course, we didn't have any recording priorities back then. We didn't know what we were talking about. You know, like now I have a absolute way I want to hear the snare. Like I have a way I want to hear the snare sound, or I know what cymbals should be, or I know what the guitar should be like. But back then you're just as green as grass, and so you go in there, you hear these words like, if you mix them on NS10s and it sounds good on NS10s, it'll sound good everywhere. And so you don't know that, you just start saying it. And somebody says, you start saying, oh, you should go to use NS10s. We didn't know anything about what NS10s did. We didn't have a clue what it was. But that was the big thing back in the 80s, that if you mix them on NS10s, which are really shitty speakers, or they're hard, you know, they're flat, or whatever it is they're talking about, then it'll sound great everywhere else. And I ran with that for years. I mean, I had no reason to think about it. But over the last few years, since I've, you know, the last 10 years especially, since I'm starting to actually get into trying to get a good sound, you know, because back in the day, you'd try to get a good sound out of your amp, but it would stop there. You wouldn't think about the microphone you put on, or the mic pre's, or the, you know, whatever you're going to put it through before it gets to the recorder. You just kind of make your amp sound good and do the best you can with that. But now that I've got all these priorities, and I understand, like I've really went into it over the last few years. I remember going into guitar sounds with Frankenstein Monster, trying to get them, you know, trying to get good guitar sounds, or good acoustic sounds on this album that I'm doing now, The Big Purple Castle. Like, we really thought about it, you know, there was a lot of thought went into it. And this concept of that, like getting shitty speakers and mixing your album on shitty speakers and it'll sound good everywhere else is I think actually the biggest load of crap I've ever heard in my life now. I mean, I've got speakers in here, right, and we set up some rough mixes on this system. I'm here now in the office, and we set up the system here, and I mix it on here, and I take it in. I've got a set of really detailed speakers in the front room, like serious, you know, serious money, like, you know, 20 grand's worth of fucking speakers back in the room in there. Amazing, absolutely amazing speakers. Paul Brown's got a system more expensive than I've got, which basically means more detail. That's what I'm really talking about. But you've got to pay money for detail when it comes to speakers. There's, you know, if you want to get into that like real high-end stuff, you've got to pay some serious cash. Otherwise, you're not going to get that sort of detail. And what do I mean by detail? Well, I could put like a Michael Jackson record on in my system in there, and you're going to hear things that you just won't hear on these speakers. You literally can't hear it when you put it on the big speakers. The detail, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know that was there. There's like shit coming out of the music. I'm like, what the fuck? You know, it's like, I didn't even know that was there. And I started to think about this. Well, because I've just been running with well, if you play them on shitty speakers, it's going to sound good everywhere. And so when I did the mixes on here, in these speakers here, and I took them into there, it was shockingly bad. What was balanced in here and how this was balanced in these speakers, and they're not terrible speakers. They're just, you know, they're all right, you know. But the levels were sometimes 5 dB off, like literally that bad. So when I took them in there, I'm going like, oh my God, what have I done with that? Like I'd have like a backing vocal that was perfectly balanced in here. I took it into there and I'm like, dude, you know, it's like incredibly loud. It's like, what's going on? And it got me thinking, because we were going to start mixing on some speakers, and I don't mean shitty speakers, I just mean, you know, like regular speakers and all that. And then it came up, well, what if I actually mixed on an incredibly detailed set of speakers? What would happen then? Because you get warned away from that. You shouldn't do that. Don't mix on good speakers. You should mix on shitty speakers or NS10s. And so I set my system up in the front room. We started to mix, and I set the balance out on those speakers, on the really detailed speakers. I'd go back and forth with me and Paul Brown on his system, which is more detailed than mine. And lo and behold, when you took those mixes that we balanced out on the big, detailed, expensive speakers, and we played them on a shitty system, it was perfectly balanced. It doesn't work the other way around, no matter what anybody tells you. Like when you get, you know, like when you get a a set of small speakers and you take them to a bigger system or a more detailed system, you can't guarantee the balances are going to be all right. Because they're going to sound weird. And across the board, like the EQ will be different. Like it'll just sound weird. You'll EQ in here if you use EQ, and then you put them on another system. It's like, dude, that's way too toppy. Or you put them in the car. It's like, dude, it's like, what's going on with the bass? But when you mix them on them big speakers, on the big, detailed, expensive speakers, on a really, really good system, what you get on that is what translates everywhere else. Don't ask me why, but it does. And so I would like to blow that concept out of the window that like you mix on shitty speakers, it sounds good everywhere. Absolute bollocks, man. It's bollocks. You want to get an incredibly expensive, detailed set of speakers and mix it on there so you can hear everything that's going on and where they balance it up at and where they lay everything out and what your reverbs sound like, what your what your delays are like and all the rest of it. Incredible detail. It actually, when you play them on another system that's less quality, that's less detailed, the actual balance of everything translates. And it's the same as on the big, it's actually the same for, and it's a weird thing because you do it the other way around, it doesn't work. But you go detailed and then you go into a smaller system or a less detailed system and it stays the same. It's still balanced perfectly well. And that's what we found with the Big Purple Castle. We mix it on two hyper detailed systems, like brutal, like you need everything. If there's anything slightly wrong on any of the tracks, you can hear it. It's like, oh my God, what's that? And then you make it right on the big system. By the time you transfer it down to your NS10s or any other speakers you can think of, it's absolutely fucking perfect. And so the notion of getting shitty speakers to mix things on, and if you can get it, sound good on there, it sounds good everywhere, is the biggest load of bollocks I've ever heard. Mix it on a really, really, really hyper detailed set of speakers if you can, and what you lay out there on the balance there, it will translate to the rest of the world, and from your car down to your Bose speakers, down to your computer speakers, everything, it'll be exactly the same as what's on the big detailed speakers.